Hello! Today we would learn about poetry, and at the end of the lesson, you should be able to read selected poems, explain the meaning of selected poems, identify the language of poetry, and write a simple poem. So, let's begin. Poetry is a piece of literature written in calculated lines. The expressions are brief and to the point. Poems have patterns of sound, imagery, rhythm, and implied meanings. Many poems even show the feelings or the emotions of the poet. Let's listen to the poem Africa by R.E.G. Amarto. I saw a maiden, dark and comely, sitting by the wayside, sad and lonely. Oh, pretty maiden, so dark and comely, why sit by the wayside, sad and lonely? I am neither sad nor lonely, she said, but living, sir, among the deaf and dumb, relentlessly watching this shameless dead, makes my warm heart grows very cold and numb. Can you guess what the poem is about? The poem is about Africans choosing Western lifestyle and cultures over African culture. To understand the meaning of a poem, you need to understand the language of the poem. Poetic language is figurative. Poets use tools such as figures of speech to make the poem more surprising, vivid, complex, or even interesting. You can identify the language of a poem by following these simple tips. 1. What and how is described in the poem using the 5 senses. Example, the smell of morning dandelion seeds floating in the wind. 2. What metaphors or similes are used in the poem. For example, anger is a storm. 3. What strange or unfamiliar words are used. 4. How are punctuations used in the poem? Do you find them in odd places? 5. What other tools or figures of speech can you identify in the poem, such as personification, repetition, and so on? In the poem we read earlier, the poet describes Africa as a young maiden. The mood of the poem is sad and heartbreaking. To write a poem, you need to do the following. Choose a topic. Understand your purpose, that is what you want to say about the topic. Choose a subject. It could be a person, a place, time, etc. Choose a format. It could be a narrative poem. Also, you need to use other important elements of poetry like rhythm, rhyme, sound, meter, and literary devices. Finally, you need to read a lot of poetry too. With that, we've come to the end of the lesson. Today we have read a poem, explained the poem, learned how to identify the language of poetry, and how to write simple poems. Hope you'll use what you've learned to write more poems. See you in the next lesson.